I never chose this life, yet somehow, I became the quiet storm in a house made of pride and conflict. My name is Abigail, and most remember me as wise, beautiful, and married to a fool, but that's not where my story begins, not really. It begins with watching my dreams dim slowly inside a home where kindness was a stranger and dignity had to be protected like a fragile flame in the wind. Nabal was powerful in the eyes of men, but I knew the ache of living with a man whose heart was drunk on his own name, who mistook cruelty for control and harshness for manhood. Day after day I played the diplomat, the bridge builder, the silent intercessor, as my voice was swallowed by walls that never listened. Yet I held peace like a sword. I used it not to harm but to disarm, not to prove myself right, but to keep us from being destroyed. There were nights I stared at the ceiling asking God if he saw me, if he noticed how many times I kept our house from crumbling, how many fires I put out before they burned our entire name to the ground. They say beauty fades, but I learned that inner strength ages like fine wine, and patience becomes a weapon in the hands of a woman who knows her worth without needing anyone else to confirm it. Sometimes I felt invisible, but invisibility is where God hides his most powerful warriors. I learned to wait with dignity, to act with wisdom, to speak only when my words could build, not break, and though my name was tied to a man who caused damage, my heart never let go of who I truly was. The day the messengers came, the day David's men arrived at our door, something in the air changed. I saw fear in the eyes of my servants, tension in the silence, danger forming like a storm on the horizon. Nabal, true to his nature, responded with pride, disrespect, and reckless words, unaware that his insults could be the final straw that broke the fragile thread of peace holding our lives together. But I had no time to argue, no time to mourn his foolishness. I had to move quickly, to become the woman God raised me to be in the shadows. With trembling hands but a steady heart, I gathered bread, wine, figs, and wisdom. I packed not only provisions but the hope that maybe this one act could stop a war before it started. I didn't ask for permission. I moved with divine urgency, because when a woman knows danger is coming and her voice has the power to turn the tide, she does not wait for applause, she acts with purpose. I rode out to meet the king in the wilderness, not as a queen, not as a victim, but as a woman bearing truth, humility, and courage. When I saw David, the warrior king not yet crowned, I bowed low. I placed myself in the dust not out of fear, but in strength, because sometimes you change the outcome not by raising your voice, but by lowering yourself with wisdom. I spoke words heavy with grace, covered in humility, soaked in divine timing, and something in him shifted. The anger that had been rising like a wave stopped, because peace can speak louder than revenge when delivered by a woman who knows her calling. I told him he didn't need to carry blood on his hands for the sake of one man's foolishness. I reminded him of who he truly was, not a man driven by rage, but a future king led by God. I spoke to the royalty in him, even though I wasn't yet a royal myself, and in that moment, something holy happened, not just for him, but for me too. I realized that I wasn't just protecting my household, I was protecting a destiny, mine included. When David looked at me, his words were not laced with pride or entitlement. They were filled with awe. He blessed God for sending me, he blessed me for coming, and he blessed the wisdom that stopped him from making a choice that could haunt him forever. I didn't just bring food that day, I brought perspective, clarity, and peace, and in doing so, I rewrote a page of history that could have ended in bloodshed. Sometimes God uses women not in the spotlight but in the margins to steer nations away from disaster. When I returned home, Nabal was feasting like a king, unaware that death had almost visited our door, and when I told him the truth the next day, his heart failed him. He died not because I wished it, but because truth will always reveal what pride tries to hide, and just like that, I was no longer tethered to a man whose name caused shame. But I didn't rejoice, I reflected, because every ending, even one wrapped in relief, comes with echoes of pain. Soon after, David sent for me, not out of obligation, but recognition. He saw the queen in me before any crown was placed on my head. He saw the woman who risked everything for peace, who didn't use beauty to seduce, but wisdom to protect, and I, Abigail, became his wife, not just a bride of the future king, but a woman honored for her strength, not silenced by her circumstances. But royalty did not erase my pain, it transformed it. I carried with me the memory of every night I had to pretend everything was fine, every day I smiled through brokenness, every prayer I whispered through tears. I didn't forget who I had been. I allowed her to shape who I was becoming, And in the palace, I remained what I had always been, a woman of quiet strength, of unshaken faith, of unspoken fire. Even among other wives and palace politics, I never sought the spotlight. I had learned that true influence doesn't always come with attention. It often comes in the silent spaces where wisdom whispers louder than noise. I wasn't David's loudest wife, but I was one of his most valued. Because he had seen what I was capable of in crisis, and that kind of trust is worth more than diamonds. I raised children with the same values I once carried to David's feet: peace, truth, and holy restraint. I taught them that being right isn't as important as being righteous, and that courage sometimes looks like riding alone into the unknown for the sake of others. I taught them that being soft isn't weak, and being silent doesn't mean being invisible. Abigail was my name, but it was more than a name. It was a calling, a banner of peace in times of war, a refuge in a storm of male egos and political chaos. I wore grace like armor, wisdom like a crown, and silence like a secret strength only those who truly saw me could understand. And through it all, I never stopped trusting the God who saw me first, even when no one else did. For the women watching this, those who feel unseen, unheard, overlooked, know this. God writes legacies in the shadows, and queens are not always born in palaces. Sometimes they're forged in homes filled with silence, in marriages filled with tension, in days filled with sacrifice. If you've had to keep peace while holding in your pain, you are not weak, you are royal. May your voice be guided by wisdom, your silence be filled with power, and your decisions lead others closer to the heart of God. May your beauty go beyond the surface, and may your strength be the kind that heaven applauds. And when the world calls you small, remember Abigail, the woman who turned the tide with humility and truth. God isn't looking for loud women, He's looking for listening ones, willing to speak at the right moment, with the right heart. Abigail was one of those, and so are you, if you choose to be. Don't despise your quiet seasons. They are training grounds for holy influence. And don't underestimate what one act of courage can do. It can stop kings, shape futures, and open doors you never imagined. And even if no one sees all the fires you've put out in silence, know that heaven does. The God who called you sees every small peacemaking act, every wise word spoken behind closed doors, every time you laid down your pride to protect something sacred. He is not blind to your story, and He is not done writing it. So take heart. Your influence is not measured by titles or applause, but by the change you spark in others when you walk into a room with grace, when you kneel with wisdom, when you love with fire, and when you choose peace over pride. I am Abigail, and I remind you that even queens in the shadows can carry the heartbeat of heaven. And if this story touched something inside you, stay with us, because here we tell the hidden stories, the sacred ones, the quiet battles that change everything.
Subscribe for more untold voices of royalty, faith, and resilience. You are not alone. In the stillness of your own story, may you find the courage to rise, the strength to speak life, and the grace to lead even in the silence. We are the daughters of wisdom, and this is just the beginning.